Good evening. My name is Stephanie Philander, and I'm a contact navigator at the IIE-Vega school based at the Cape Town campus. Welcome to our final postgraduate evening for 2020 at IIE-Vega school. We're doing things a bit differently this time around. We have the pleasure of having 3 industry experts join us for a discussion around the future of brand building. Tonight's session will run as follows. Each expert will have 10 minutes to present their opinion on the future of brand building. The presentations will be followed by a quick Q&A that will be facilitated by Dr. Carla Enslin. After the Q&A, I'll be back to answer any questions you may have regarding the postgraduate qualifications delivered at Vega. I will also provide you with more information regarding the application and registration process at Vega School. But first, allow me the opportunity to introduce our panel for tonight. First up, we've got Dr. Carla Enslin. She's the Head of Strategy and New Business Development, as well as the founding member of the IIE's Vega School. Karen Lowe is a Manager Director and founder of Go Forward, a strategic PR and communications consultancy in Cape Town. As Chief Synergy Officer for Self-Actualize, Karen is also a perception coach and keynote speaker. Lastly, we have Cameron Belling, Group Brand Manager for Ignition Group, an international telecommunications and digital performance company based in Durban. Welcome once again, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Dr. Carla Enslin.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute privilege to be with you. Thank you so much for giving us 2 hours of your time. And also to Karen Lowe and Cameron Belling. It's an absolute pleasure to have Karen with us. She's renowned for her entrepreneurship and such a compelling brand and leadership. And also to Cameron Belling, one of the most elegant thinkers I've ever had the good fortune of working with, and certainly an astute channel planner. We're also remarkably proud of Cameron, who has recently completed his master's and achieved it cum laude. My conceptual direction for this evening is really focused on the future of brand building from a sense-making perspective, and perhaps the statement that we frequently encounter in boardrooms and put to use is that idea of seeing the wood for the trees. And in the process of seeing the wood for the trees, there's also the reality of the Independent Institute of Education and what it is that we have set out to achieve in the postgraduate space at Vega. As a founder member, it's a privilege to have been involved with several teams, dedicated academics, and of course academics at Vega are both qualified but also industry experts in their field, constantly active on real-life briefs and projects, engaging with the models and tools that they are putting to use in studios and lecture rooms and colloquiums. So in this context, we have evolved over time from a postgraduate diploma that still offers a very rigorous offering in brand contact strategy and communications planning to a very recent addition, our Doctor of Philosophy in brand leadership. And when you reach out to deal with industry expectation and shaping academic programs for the future of brand building, you are sensitized to all that it is that brand building needs to achieve in a very contemporary world, a fast-changing world, a world that is proliferated in terms of its offerings and often beyond human need, if you really think about it. But we so often in those classical frameworks where we celebrate the leadership, the commercial brand success of the big players out there. And we also need to remind ourselves that brands exist not only in commercial form, as we see here, the big equity players, the guys who have really evolved from very high levels of brand awareness to equally high levels of loyalty as their financial performance supports. To also consider that in the world of postgraduate studies, or let's put it down to postgraduate thinking, you're also engaging with very abstract landscapes and complex brand scenarios. Brands exist not only in the form of product and service offerings, brands exist in the shape of cities, countries, social movements, and our recent, very strange, but also very dense year and most recent past presents many a brand with a complex challenge ahead and a future riddled with challenges. If we consider the unique nature of branding and what it is that we wish to achieve as postgraduate thinkers and doers, it's really making sense in very deep and textured ways of why it is that we focus on brand strategy, of why it is that you and I have dedicated our careers to brand strategy, or we're about to dedicate time and energy and investment to postgraduate studies. We work with marketeers, we work with business individuals, we work in the world of communications and relationship building. But above all, we're active in a very dedicated space. And that dedicated space, in my opinion, is becoming increasingly more nuanced and increasingly more critical in producing more creative solution seeking. So what am I hinting at? Brand strategy has a very unique character. It's a strategy for uniqueness. We're called to boardrooms to uncover what it is that brands stand for, to uncover a very unique and a very compelling reason for a brand to exist. And again, whether that brand is a commercial entity, an entrepreneur, a social venture, or a political party, it is our responsibility to ensure that a business model supports an identity system that is compelling, will add value to how people live life, and will extend itself into the future, 10 to 15 to 25 years from now. This brand will sustain the unique, compelling difference that it makes. It is a remarkable responsibility. And in this space, seeing the wood for the trees is the actual challenge and the reason why you would invest in postgraduate strategy. In a postgraduate strategic context, in postgraduate studies then, for that reason, you're confronted by complexity. You have numerous brands finding a unique positioning in a particular landscape, but you're also recognizing that a brand exists as an ecosystem. It's a particular identity making a particular promise, but working with so many stakeholders to make that promise possible. From unions to media groups, to consumer markets, to distributors, to suppliers. And if you're active in a highly heterogeneous environment, as we are in South Africa, Southern Africa, and Africa, we're blessed with complexity because at the same point in time, we're scaling our innovation, our ability to integrate with, work with a myriad of stakeholder groups to really make brands happen, to design and engineer business models that are able to deliver on a particular brand promise. And we are on many levels from a global scale considering the future of brand building, identified as a consumer market, identified as an industry, communications industry, brand building industry that is able to deal with complexity. Our global sister and brother brands out there recognize our ability to deal with very heterogeneous conditions. And it's in this context that I see complexity increasing, but the simplicity of strategy becoming increasingly more important. How does this affect a postgraduate world? And I can imagine that at this point in time, you are engaging with a presentation, thinking of your own career, thinking of your own future, thinking of the brand that you are currently involved with or would truly be delighted to work for. And at the same point in time, considering what is it that postgraduate studies genuinely offer other than the qualification, the mark, the certificate of approval. It really is about your ability to mature as a creative solution seeker, as a nuanced, elegant thinker. So on degree level, the position you're currently at, you're in a position where you've really been able to master a particular toolbox of models, ways of doing, ways of thinking, whether that's in the world of commerce or whether that's in the world of humanities. You've been exposed to a kit. The idea at postgraduate level is to put that kit to practice in increasingly more complex environments, dealing with nuanced challenges, dealing with real-world conditions, dealing not only, as I alluded earlier, with a consumer market relationship, but dealing with several stakeholder relationships. And you just need to consider our recent and our current political and social nature in South Africa to understand how many stakeholder groups need to be working together to make for a successful economic future, to consider what it is when Pravin Gordon presents a model such as a total approach to an SAL solution, its complexity that we're engaging with. On a master's level, you then have the opportunity to apply models and tools that you now not only understand from a degree level, but that you are able to relate in complex environments, in an honors environment or a postgraduate diploma environment, to now a master's level of independent research. Positioning yourself as an independent thinker, as an individual with not only the toolkit, the way of thinking and complexity, but the ability to apply your own research project successfully, independently. And then, of course, the reason why we're so proud of the launch of our recent doctorate in philosophy dedicated to brand leadership is the opportunity to now start contributing new ways of thinking, models and tools that will enhance how industry goes about building meaningful brands that connect with people and create shared value. So all in all, when I talk about or refer to seeing the wood for the trees, it's really considering the critical variables that should guide your decision making in the future of brand building, in the future of your career, in the future of your own personal success. And that is to head for environments, and whatever choice it is that you make, head for environments that will prepare you for collaborative strategic activity, that will expose you to collaborative transdisciplinary teams, projects with real industry engagement, real world challenges, and certainly deep, immersive encounters with what it is that it takes to build a brand, a successful, meaningful brand in a developing world. And it's for this reason that I'd love to conclude with a thought. You're here because you are by nature the individual, ambitious, ready to extend, and certainly attracted to the idea of becoming an increasingly more elegant, more astute, more strategic thinker, able to solve challenges with meaningful solutions. And I'd love to hand over to Karen at this point in time with the challenge that the world indeed needs more creative solution seekers. Karen, it's such a privilege to have you with us. As I said earlier, your entrepreneurial drive is certainly your signature, and we look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Carla, and good evening to everybody. I absolutely loathe non-video presentations. So all of you turn your video on, quick. No, I'm joking. I really am joking because I've got no hair or makeup on tonight and it'll be a disaster. So good evening again to everybody. I echo Carla. In fact, I echo her so much that I remember 25 years ago, Carla, being in your class and you as my lecturer. That is how long ago it was. But the definitive difference a brand is trying to make in the world is mission critical. And I have a view from my decades of PR and reputation management for businesses and individuals, but I've added a new layer of conscious branding that I believe needs to be anchored in purpose, and I believe brands need to be challenging bias. So in addition to the PR and reputation management that I'm involved in on a day-to-day basis, I have moved into the world of perception coaching, and the collision of these two worlds is throwing up some very interesting learnings, which I would like to share with you this evening. So thank you for having me. So who took over my name? My name is Karen. I am a brand, and I'd very much like to speak to the manager because I'm very unhappy with the way tonight's presentation is going. However, I have a question for all of you, and one I'd like you to ponder. Can you weaponize a name to shift a bias? Well, here we have Karenism, and you have officially met the most Karenist Karen that ever Karened. But brands and their unconscious biases are exposed on a daily basis. And all I need to do is point to the clicks debacle recently to make my case in point here. I'm sure we've seen many versions of these cartoons over the last week or so. The most important takeaway here for me is that we need to consider shifting away from it's all about me influences to others-centered influences, or risk being irrelevant. What does this mean for brands? Well, I believe our expectations of brands have changed dramatically. They need to consider what they are doing and how they're doing it, or the vote against their brand will count significantly. And for any of you that are interested, there's a very, very interesting article that was published in Fast Company recently that spoke about a shift in business values and that the social contract that applies to capitalism has been rewritten. And what this means is basically creating the value for shareholders at the expense of everything else will be completely radically out of touch. So creating value for the world now seems to be the only viable thing to do, and I hope you would agree. There's a need to force investors, leaders, and product, marketing, and operations teams to reconsider what they do and how they do it, and how they can be part of a reconstruction, or, as I said, risk being irrelevant. This is an interesting statement. What you hide controls you. And I'm sure as you enter the field of branding or have been studied the field of branding for so many years, the word authenticity is thrown around continuously. But in my opinion, authenticity is not always genuine. And herein lies a major problem for brands. So in striving for authenticity, my definition of authentic brand is one that nurtures the intrinsic values in people that will support lasting positive change. It's better business and it's the way of the future. But it's a bit of a contradiction. A fictional brand personality meant to personalize a corporation consisting of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people. Can they ever really be authentic in a meaningful sense? Something that one needs to consider when looking at brand building. I wish I could ask this question out loud. I'm sure you are all familiar with Seth Godin's purple cow. I am remarkable, but do any of you know what those emojis mean? Well, I'll translate it for you, because I'm a, Gen Y, millennial, digital native. It means I don't have a cow. So my point here is be remarkable, but you can't join the conversation if you don't speak the language. Brands have to translate believably. The branded voice really has been forced to become increasingly personal to fit in. So I would say irony, self-reference, hyperbole, this is all the language of the digital natives out there. And any brand that's not fluent will inevitably be ignored. I do wonder if you will agree. Also, an interesting statement to ponder. If you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. If you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. So the question here is, what must a brand promise to do better? And what must they follow through on? I believe brands must truly embrace diversity. Diversity for me is a field that I've ventured into over the last year or two, and it's feared to such an extent that it has led to inaction. There are loads of marketers out there, brand managers out there, that are forced into a position of inaction. And when action does happen, it's often through stereotyping and tokenism. And this is something that I am increasingly passionate about challenging. Diversity, it's a very, very powerful word, but it can be a very paralyzing word, and one that is feared by many, many people in the brand industry. So it seems sort of straightforward and an obvious thing to do, but it has gone wrong so many times. Embracing diversity is one of the most critical cornerstones of brand building for me, and that extends beyond South African borders to global. So now more than ever, think we, not me. This statement for me implies that brands must stay present, reflective, and very curious. If you stop asking questions, you're not going to get the answers, and make sure that you're asking the right questions to get the right answers. So at the heart of this, and at the heart of where I am leading you tonight, I believe that brands must become self-aware. Now, this is a discussion for an entire other conference and can spend 3 hours debating this topic. But it is unquestionable future of building equality, sustainability, integrity, diversity, inclusion, and respect. Never, ever before has a legacy mattered more. And Carla did touch on that in her conversation. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. In a brand conscious assessment, we need to be on the lookout for a couple of things. One is our ability to be deliberate, which speaks to having a higher purpose as a brand and a business, and really having a purpose-driven strategy that guides our thinking. To be aware, every part of our communication has to be conscious. We need intrinsically engaged people within the organization that are gelled with the brand, in glue with the company's mission and vision. And we need empathetically connected customers. And lastly, we need to be awake. The world has never changed as fast as I've seen in the last year, and we're all playing catch up. But being agile and responsible is what we call awake, is of critical importance. So let me leave you with 3 ways to get brand building right, in my perspective. Be deliberate, be aware, and be awake. And Cameron, it's over to you.
Thanks, Karen. Good evening, guys. So what was quite interesting for me in listening to Carla and Karen's presentation is we were all kind of briefed on similar context, but what was interesting is there were similarities between our presentations, and you'll kind of see them as we go across. So just something about me is I did my undergraduate at Vega, and I actually did the creative brand communication degree. And it was only about 8 years later in my career that I decided to do my honors degree in strategic brand communication. So for those of you that are completing your creative degree, or those of you that have finished your commerce degree, there's no reason why you can't make the change into strategy now or later on. just in my personal career, I found strategy came to me much later on. Being a designer for 8 years, I needed a career change, and making that strategic move really changed my perspective of branding, and it was something that I later found in completing my master's. So just a bit about my presentation is I've really just got thoughts around branding that I'd like to share with you, and where I think brands are going and where they should be going. So if we have a look at it, brands need to focus more on the experiential side of their communication planning. So shifting outside of the 2D print ads and billboards, entering consumers, the consumer journey, and making it more interactive through out-of-home or ambient media is really quite critical in brand building nowadays. Seeing a great print ad, a great TV ad is one thing, but if brands can step outside and interact with the consumer's environment, it really makes a larger impact. You can see through this example of Sprite taking simple things like beach showers and converting it into something really interesting and engaging for consumers to interact with. This is quite a buzzword at the moment. So machine learning and data science, the power of big data within branding is exponential. Working in a high performance digital marketing company, the amount of data that you can mine and utilize in your strategy is a huge thing for brands to consider. I read an interesting statistic that said by 2025, 90% of customer interactions will be supported by AI. We kind of see that nowadays with chatbots and various other interactive elements on digital media and app platforms, where brands are now utilizing every touch point along the way, and also optimizing that experience to make it more engaging and interactive for purchasing behavior. Another notion we have is the mobile phone. 15 years ago, the mobile phone was just on the starting point of where it is today. Nowadays, mobile is absolutely everything. You can get an app for ordering your lunch, going on a date, doing your banking. Everything is in the palm of your hand. The power of mobile, and I go back to the machine learning and the data part of it, is all within there for brands to utilize within their brand strategy. It's how you harness that journey along the way. And particularly something I found in doing my master's research is ensuring that consumer journey is seamless and holistic across the different channels that brands occupy. There's nothing worse than if you land on a website or if you go to a social media page, it doesn't resemble anything of what the campaign or the click-through was before that. So brands need to be quite critical about the channels that they utilize and how they implement it within their brand strategy. Another important consideration is the power of the story. Brands that are generating stories for consumers to buy into is also an important critical aspect of the brand strategy. Realizing who your audience is and making it interesting and engaging is paramount to the success of your brand strategy. This was a point that Karen touched on, is being authentic. So brands need to consider that the message that they portray is real and relevant to the audience that they're speaking to. With the amount of technology that we have nowadays, it's very easy to call out brands that aren't living up to their real or authentic persona that they portray. So being authentic and being real with the consumers that you engage with is also another important aspect. Particularly within the world that we've lived in now for the last 8 months, or the new normal, is the power to be agile. This is a United States job-seeking website. And obviously when the results came out on Saturday, all of these billboards went up all over America. Now, it's quite clear who it is in the billboard, but the power to be agile and to take what's going on in the environment around you and utilizing that within a quick brand story. Brands can no longer sit around and develop this 2-year, 5-year strategy and hope that the world is not going to change. This year has been quite an example of how brands have had to adapt, modify, and completely change their brand strategy of what they'd set out at the beginning of the year. Also, the idea of being consumer-centric and the power of empathy and the human connection. As consumers, we don't want to be broadcasted to in this blanket approach. We want something that is unique to ourselves and our personalities that we engage with. The brands need to consider, again, who their audience is and how they can make it as real and authentic as possible within their brand communication message. A final thought is the notion of sustainability, in particular with the target markets like millennials, who, another interesting statistic, that 75% of millennials are willing to pay more for products that come from businesses who are working to be more sustainable and environmentally friendly. So an interesting catchphrase or notion is greenwashing, and that's in the sense of brands that are using fluffy language with no clear meaning, and also trying to window dress what their brands are doing, yet they're actually not environmentally conscious or eco-friendly. Brands that are doing this really well at the moment are Lush. So I'm sure we've all walked past a Lush store. It's one of those great stores that you can smell from about when you walk in from the parking area. It's got such a great brand personality, I think, and really something that people have considered an entire brand experience, from senses to when you actually engage product. Another interesting brand around sustainability is Patagonia, who strongly believes that recycling of clothing is something that can be done. And the entire transparency in their value chain to share where their products come from and how they generate new products is something brands should consider. Final thought, the campaign that I think really still stands out for me was a campaign that was generated in about 2017 by Aero-Mexico. So we all know in 2017 there were political kind of conflicts between Mexico and the US, obviously by the person in charge of America. I don't name who. But as a way to increase tourism into Mexico, they suggested that if you took a DNA test, depending on your percentage of Mexican in your bloodline, you would get that as a discount. So as an example, if I went and got myself tested from a heritage point of view, and they traced back that I had 25% Mexican in me, I would get 25% discount off my line fee. So that'd be great, 25% to go to Mexico and not have to pay the full price. So what they found with this campaign, that 54.4% of the tests were Mexican DNA. So obviously different percentages, but that was the total. What this campaign generated was a whole lot of shared media impressions. We know the benefit of shared media is it doesn't cost us anything. So from a cost point of view, Aero-Mexico was so effective that all those different channels and news channels that you see at the bottom shared this campaign, not costing them a cent. So just in the sense of how brands can take something that's going on and turn it on its head and make it an effective campaign is so critical in brand strategy and brand management at the moment, particularly, as Carla has mentioned, this year being one of the strangest years we've all lived in, and how brands have had to adapt quickly and change to the new environment. And that concludes my session.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and thank you, Karen. Really valuable and rich insights. Before we hand over to Stephanie, I'd love to ask you both a question. And of course, to the community present, I'm sure we've all individually drawn on patterns that emerged for us. A pattern that certainly emerged for me has been one that we've really interrogated with our honours teams in particular, and that is how very quickly as brand folk we tend to rely on language and terms, and they very soon become mere wallpaper words that you hear all of the time. But for that reason, we hear most of our media journalists also now referring to authenticity and authentic brands to such an extent that we actually have various definitions of the truth. So on that level, you made a beautiful statement, Karen. You said brands have to translate believably. And Cameron also reflected on the authenticity of being, called out for just being what you want. And what I picked up from your presentation was also the importance of recognizing the influence of the internal organization, the people of the brand, and how translating believably also involves alignment internally. You're currently working quite extensively as a coach, and you've married, coaching and strategy and brand building. Tell us a bit more about your work in brand alignment and how you think that in itself is kind of a higher order form of strategy that matures as you mature in the postgraduate world.
Thanks, Carla. Yes, it's an interesting departure from the traditional world of branding, but it is incredibly rich territory for me right now, and rich for a number of reasons. And I alluded to the concept of self-awareness, and a lot of my coaching studies have taken me down the path, or two paths, one around developing self-awareness and insight of self and what that means and how that can be translated to brand. And the other is a more activism area of women in the workplace and diversity and inclusion and having their voices heard. And for me, the most important thing an organization can do front and center before they look to crafting their brand identity and articulating their brand voice is to understand what their intent and purpose is. Insights and self-awareness are based on values and passions, things like aspirations, fit, patterns, reactions. But more importantly, and most importantly, I think the singular departure point is what impact brands or what impact you as an individual are having on others. And most of the conversations around self-awareness, be they aligned to an individual or be they aligned to a brand, forget that critical component, impact. And it's absolutely something that brands need to take into consideration. They need to develop their own sense of self-awareness. And on the other side, when we're speaking about language and translating our brand and our purpose and what we want to make better in the world and what impact we want to have is the language in which we do it. And here for me, we speak about channel navigators or navigators. The steering wheel needs to be handed over with trust to the consumers. And that's what I meant by empathetic and engaged staff and empathetic and engaged consumers. There is a direct correlation between staff engagement, their ability to adapt to change, their ability to understand their impact on the world at large, and for brands to really be genuine in their voice because they're having dialogue and conversations with their audience. It is not a one-way shout, it is a two-way conversation. And I hope I've but really microscripts as we know them, and we can go through many over the 25 years. I remember brands with very, very powerful delivery points. Is that where the meaning starts? It's the purple cow or I don't own a cow. In millennials today, the digital natives today, they've got a whole different language. And if you don't understand it, don't pretend to understand it. Engage with it. And I always say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask your audience, ask your market, ask them to co-create your brand with you. And that comes from the self-awareness within an organization that extends to the self-awareness of the brand, and that matches the audience and their sort of delivers an empathetic message. Carla, I hope that's answered your question.
Absolutely, and I think as much as Cameron touched on the consciousness, you touched on conscious brand assessments. And of course, to the earlier point, when you consider how you mature from degree level studies into a postgraduate world, it's that complexity of alignment that's actually happening throughout an ecosystem with all of your stakeholder groups. And you've got channel navigators on so many different levels. So a very challenging strategic imperative, the notion of alignment, and really being able to translate what it is that your brand stands for to an extent that people actually genuinely get to feel, think, and believe in the value that you add. Cameron, on that level, the one thing that really matured in your thinking across examples is your own agility and your ability to move from a channel planning perspective to a contact perspective to introducing unconventional and alternative contact strategies, and actually traveling into a space where you even touch on narrative. So you've clearly become or evolved into a very strong transdisciplinary thinker. And you also mentioned that strategy matured for you. How did your postgraduate studies contribute?
Thanks, Carla. So I think being a creative thinker has always been in me. I think I went along the natural progression of going into graphic design and art direction, but then later finding a love for strategy in working with various brands and briefs along the way. So that's probably how my thinking has kind of revolved around different aspects and being engaged in the different roles that I've completed across my personal career. Just in thinking how brands cannot be of the sense of we've always done it that way. The ability to try new things and test new waters has got to be something with innovation and creative brand thinking, and how brand strategists and media planners work through the different brand communication strategies. Yeah. It's just this year has been a perfect example of how we can't be complacent because we've set out a plan and we can't change it. Why not? Asking those questions, and it's a hard challenge to go back to a client and say, look, I don't think the strategy that we put out is going to do as well as what we projected. How about we try a different channel, different campaign, or different approach? I hope that answers what your question to me.
Well, it certainly reinforces what Karen also stressed in terms of being able to ask what is the old that we need to do less of. And you're saying, well, what is that critical question that we need to ask? And I think the one thing that we certainly realize as we enter a postgraduate world is that it is remarkably challenging to arrive at a point and ask in very little time exactly the right question, and as a result shift the thinking in a boardroom, which of course again is perhaps one of the higher order skills in strategic thinking. Thank you so much for your input, Karen and Cameron. We really appreciate it. And Stephanie, we look forward to your input. Stephanie is going to share very briefly our program offering in the postgraduate space and touch on the admission criteria, but also very importantly and exciting is the launch in 2020 of our scholarships, a scholarship for the BA Honours in Strategic Brand Communication, and also a BCom Honours in Strategic Brand Management. So touching on those scholarships, the admission criteria, the program, Cameron, thank you very much. And we can then wrap with the question and answers that our tribe may have this evening. And of course, Stephanie will also introduce how it is that we can go about connecting and answering any questions that you might have. Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Carla. And also thank you to Cameron and Karen for such an informative and inspiring session. I think after 2020 showing us flames, literally, we needed that bit of inspiration to just push through to the final stretch in preparation for even greater things to come for next year. Before I touch base on the application and registration process, I'd like to also just discuss the IIE postgraduate qualifications delivered at Vega just briefly under the brand communication, brand management, and design space. So under brand communication, we have a BA Honours in Strategic Brand Communication, postgraduate diploma in brand building. So this is generally for students from any undergraduate background, given that you have a final year average of 50%. We also deliver a Master of Arts in Creative Brand Leadership, and I'm so excited to announce the Doctor of Philosophy in Brand Leadership. So really great things happening for Vega. Under the brand management space, we have the BCom Honours in Strategic Brand Management and a Master of Commerce in Strategic Brand Leadership. Just note that should you be applying for these qualifications, you would need a relevant or cognate undergraduate degree within NQF Level 7, either completed or in the process of completing it, a final year average of 60% to apply. In the design space, we deliver a BA Honours in Interior Design and a BA Honours in Graphic Design. So should you wish to apply for these qualifications, we would require relevant or cognate undergrad, either in Interior Design or in Graphic Design with an NQF Level 7, with a 60% final year average, as well as a portfolio submission. So you should be ready, I'm hoping, to apply by now. So it's quite simple. To apply, you just visit the website, connect with a contact navigator, connect with us via our website, email, or with WhatsApp right now. Number 2 is to complete your application form and pay the application fee of 700 Rand right now. Our applications are closing at the end of November. Thereafter, a late application fee will apply. To submit your application, you would need to submit the application completed along with the supporting documents, which includes a copy of your ID, latest transcript, and then a proof of payment for the application fee. You can email this to your contact navigator and we will be in touch soonest. And then for even more exciting news, we are introducing the IIE-Vega Postgraduate Scholarship. Essentially, we are looking for somebody that embodies our mantra of wisdom with magic. We're giving away 2 scholarships in the brand communication and brand management space. So should you need more information regarding the scholarship, I would advise you to email @vegaschool.com. Please note that applications are closing on the 27th of November for the scholarship. So please get your applications in as soon as possible. You are more than welcome to reach out to us via our website, like I said, WhatsApp, or via email.